Well, we finally reached it. It's the climax to Spider-Man's first encounter with the Jackal. It's been a long, hard road, but certainly it's been worth it, right? Right? Hello? Welcome to Kevin's commentary on comics. Today, The Amazing Spider-Man number 149, Even If I Live, I Die. Brought to us by Jerry Conway with Ross Andrew and cover art by Gil Kane. Yes, all of these episodes I've done on mid-70s Spider-Man, and I finally got to the one I really wanted to talk about. This is the issue, the big one, the climactic battle with the Jackal. Let's not waste any more time, okay? Now, if we remember from last issue, the Jackal stands revealed to be none other than Peter Parker's biochemistry teacher, Professor Miles Warren. Now, after defeating the tarantula, the Jackal struck Spider-Man from behind, and as Spidey falls into unconsciousness, we get a one-page recap of what's gone on last issue, but I'm not really displaying that here, so, just go see my last episode if you want to get the deets on that. When Spidey wakes up, he is strapped to a table. Really doesn't take much for him to get out of it, of course, and the two face off. Spider-Man says the Jackal is a sick man, and the Jackal contends that he may be sick, but he's not a murderer. Not that he really was accused of such. Got a guilty conscience there, Jackal? So the two fight. Well, actually, Spider-Man tries to fight, but never really lands a punch, while the Jackal almost literally tears Spidey apart with his claws. Now, how an older man like Miles Warren have such skill over Spider-Man? Well, maybe the Jackal has superpowers, or maybe it's just because Spider-Man is still groggy from the last time he was knocked out by the Jackal, but either way, the Jackal beats Spider-Man, and as Spidey tries to recover, we finally find out why the Jackal is so bent on destroying Spider-Man. The answer? Well, it was because of Gwen. You see, from the first day he saw her, Professor Warren admired Gwen Stacy and felt like she was the daughter he never had. Now, this is in the text of the comic. As you can see here, there are words like protective and fatherly, and maybe this was retconned, or maybe I just misunderstood all this time, but I always thought that Warren was in love with Gwen Stacy, which is why he had such an emotional reaction to her death. It's also admittedly creepy that a much older guy is interested in a teenager, but we kind of know that Warren isn't the most mentally sound person of all time, don't we? So anyway, Warren, distraught over her death, comes up with an idea after his assistant, Anthony Serba, successfully cloned a frog. Warren gave Serba the tissue samples he had collected from his class, and 4 weeks later, Serba busts into Warren's office declaring that the tissue samples were human, and they had to destroy these things at once. Warren goes nuts and accidentally kills Serba, but of course, Warren doesn't think he did it. It was someone else. The Jackal. So he watches over the clones himself and begins to build a Jackal costume and Jackal type equipment. He also did athletic training, which I guess explains why he was able to take down Spidey, I guess, but he really doesn't have any superpowers, so seems like kind of a stretch that he was able to be that athletic to take on Spider-Man, even a drugged Spider-Man at that. The clone of Gwen Stacy comes out of the clone casket. Casket, I think, is an interesting phrase here, but that's what they called it. And she was obviously looking just as beautiful as she did when she was murdered. Well, before she was murdered. I'm not sure how good someone looks after they've been murdered. Now, I've mentioned this before, but apparently when you clone someone, they have all of their memories intact up to the point that the tissue sample is taken. So Warren spent a few months bringing those memories out through hypnosis, along with some subliminal commands for her to obey him whenever he called. And honestly, I can only imagine what he may have had her do for him. You know what I'm saying? Waka waka tow tow. So after explaining all of this, the Jackal scurries away, telling Spider-Man to meet him at Shea Stadium at midnight. So Peter changes back into his civilian duds and heads to the Daily Bugle, mainly to find Mary Jane Watson because he admits he's been neglecting her lately. Obviously, the Gwen thing has kind of taken over most of his waking thoughts. He enters J. Jonah Jameson's office as Betty is crying because Ned, Peter, and Gwen Stacy had all gone missing. Peter claims he hadn't seen Ned in almost a week, and for some reason, JJJ gets all angry at Peter. And I'm not really sure why that is, other than maybe it's just generally how Jonah reacts to things, but it's almost like he knew that Peter was lying. I'm not sure about that. Anyway, Pete says he'll find Ned. Later that night, Spider-Man swings into Shea Stadium where the Jackal once again gets Spider-Man with his claws. So what happened to Peter's spider sense here? Now, the last time the Jackal did this, it was explained that Pete's spider sense didn't alert him to danger from a friend, but hey, at this point, the Jackal, nor Miles Warren, can be considered Peter's friend, right? So why no spider sense warning? I'm not sure, but keep that spider sense thing in mind. We're gonna get back into that a little bit later. So Spider-Man wakes up and what the heck? There's another Spider-Man next to him? The Jackal explains that he also made a clone of Peter Parker and that this clone has been updated with all of Pete's memories up to the point when the Jackal just attacked him minutes ago, hours ago. Really, this timeline from when the Jackal attacked him when Spidey entered Shea Stadium to this point really isn't clear. It's also not clear on why it took the Jackal months to get Gwen Stacy's memories up to date, but a much shorter time in order for the Spider clone to be up to date. And here's something else I don't get. Remember, a few issues back, the Jackal, with the help of the Grizzly, put a tracking device on Peter's arm. Granted, it was only for a few pages, but the Jackal said it was so he could follow Parker around to get to Spider-Man. Peter Parker takes pictures of Spider-Man. He was invariably going to cross paths with him at some point in time, and the Jackal wanted to know about it. If he had this clone the whole time, and obviously must have known that Peter was Spider-Man, so why was a tracking device even necessary? Now, considering the device really didn't cause any problems at all for Peter, it makes that little plot device even more useless than it was originally. That's kind of aggravating. So the Jackal has Ned Leeds bound up and hanging below a bomb, which has a diffusing mechanism that's keyed to the real Spider-Man. So only the real one can save Ned. Now that's some pretty advanced diffusing mechanism, ain't it? And to top it all off, the bomb is set to go off in a few minutes anyway. So the two Spider-Men fight for a bit until they realize that they had to work together to fix this problem, but their time was almost out. At this point, Gwen Stacy has had enough and takes off the Jackal's mask and rips it apart. Her hypnosis is worn off and she accuses Warren of being a sick, jealous man and a murderer. Now, for some reason, this brings Warren to his senses and he realizes he is the one who killed Serba, not the Jackal. He rushes over and he frees Ned Leeds, who is then caught by one of the Spider-Men, and the bomb explodes and basically looks like it just vaporizes Warren and brings the scoreboard down on all three of them, the three being Ned Leeds and the two Spider-Men. So a Spider-Man crawls out from under the rubble with Ned Leeds still alive, but the other Spider-Man is dead. So Gwen asks, how does the living Spider-Man know he's the real Spider-Man and not the clone? And Spider-Man says, well, simple. Far out. More on that in a minute. So now we have two epilogues to close out the story. One is where the Gwen Stacy clone says goodbye to Peter because they can't be together and basically she just kind of walks off. The second epilogue is Peter heading up to his apartment and just before he opens his door, his spider sense goes off indicating someone is in his apartment. Maybe we're supposed to believe it's Gwen, but it's really Mary Jane and Peter is certainly happy about that. Closes the door and, things happen. All right, so let's just wait a second. His spider sense went off? What about it not supposed to be going off if it's a friend? This really is some frustrating inconsistencies with the writing here. To me, this is pretty significant. You can't say in one issue the spider sense doesn't go off if a friend is nearby, and then have it go off the next issue when a friend is nearby. All right. So I'm Kevin, and that was my commentary. Wow, a big old set of episodes to get to this. There were some inconsistencies in the writing, and let's face it, just kind of some bad writing. But to be honest, this story was still great. It was a nice long play story, and I've said before, I love long play stories. The Jackal may have been a ripoff of the Green Goblin, but he certainly set his mark in Spider-Man history, because as we all know, this is a story that sets up the big clone saga in the mid-90s with Maximum Clonage and Ben Reilly, the Scarlet Spider, and Kane, and a couple other characters I can't remember. Now, I read that when it first came out, but I had to go to Wikipedia to get a refresher on it, and honestly, I'm more confused than I probably was when I read it originally. But suffice to say, this storyline that we just completed started it all. What did you think about it? Leave a comment in that good old comment section below. Now, there is one more issue to this thing, which is The Amazing Spider-Man number 150. And going back to the old far out comment that Spider said in reply to him not being the clone. That is addressed in 150, and I thought about doing a full episode on it, but really it's basically just a story about Peter disposing of the clone in that fateful smokestack, facing off against Professor Smythe and his Spider Slayer, and ultimately it ends up with how Peter knows he's the real Spider-Man, and this boils all down to his feelings he has for Mary Jane. Because he has those feelings for Mary Jane, he obviously is the up-to-date Spider-Man. And Kirk Connors, as part of this story, actually got a definitive report on if he was or if he wasn't, but since Peter was so sure about his MJ feelings, he didn't even read it. He just tossed it off a building. All right, so this may have made sense, except for the fact that in 149, the one we just reviewed, the Jackal says he put Peter's memory DNA into the Spidey clone so that when they both woke up, they were basically identical. So does that make sense? Basically, that Spider clone would have had those same Mary Jane feelings if this whole business of DNA holding memories and I guess feelings is true. Then that's kind of not a good way to go off of. And hey, if you had the actual proof in a lab report, why not read it? What difference would it have made? The clone was apparently dead, so you'd just have to go on as Peter no matter what. So what was the harm in reading it? Now, maybe there was some basis of this, or there was some reference to this in the mid-90s Clone Saga. Maybe that was actually part of what caused this. I don't know. I really couldn't find a reference to it, and, I honestly, seriously doubt I'll ever go back and read that mess again. Whew! It's quite a set of reviews, wasn't it? So what's next? Well, I'm sticking with my 70s theme because I've been loving it, and I've recently been dipping into some pretty great issues of Captain America, and I'll start down that path in the next episode. So don't miss out on the red, white, and blue greatness, and subscribe to my channel. Also, please like and share this video. Until next time, have one heck of a great day, and I will see ya.